My husband. Okay.
All right, so we're joined from Duncanville, Texas, by Brittney Wardlaw, published author, Juris Doctorate graduate, multiple business owner, outspoken advocate for minority worker rights. We thank you so much for joining us today. I've got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson High School, and we're recording this for all of our friends in our business law classes in Madison County schools, including my good friend April Majors over at Ridgeland High School, my friend Jennifer Coate at the Academic Options Center, Madison Central High School, Germantown High School, and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule because you are also a mother of five.
Yes. That I that I am. I have
Uh,
one child still around, but the other four are at school right now.
that's awesome. Well, before we, because we got a lot to unpack, we obviously want to hear about your own journey and you and your husband's business ventures. But just give us a little background. Went to Liberty University there in Lynchburg, Virginia, and
Yeah.
got a degree, and went to law school. So just
Yeah.
give us a little background about your education and about your law school experience.
Yeah. I did go to Liberty for undergrad and majored in business. Ended up getting two business degrees while I was there because I was going to finish early with international business. And they said, hey, you can also do a marketing degree as well. And so I double majored there. And while I was in undergrad, they were just starting the law school. And I had taken a business law class. Oh, and I didn't even say, hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for, and I think that you are doing. This is incredible. This is incredible. And it's an honor, y'all. So while I was in undergrad, they were just starting the law school. And I had heard most of my life that I should be a lawyer, probably because people say it was because I like to argue, and that was not the case. What it was is I have always been a big advocate for what is right. And if I saw wrongs or injustices, I felt compelled to insert myself. And so that was my childhood. And so when I was in law school and they were starting the law school, I'm sorry, when I was in undergrad and they were starting the law school, it kind of piqued my interest. I had to take a business law class in undergrad and I did really well. And the professor was also a professor in the law school. And he said, hey, I think you should really consider this. And so I started exploring it. And then next thing I know, I was applying. And next thing I know, I was in. Now, I did get initially waitlisted. And the reason I got waitlisted was because in my essay that I was communicating my interest, I said I didn't want to be a lawyer. And they were like, what? I was like, why are you talking? Essentially, I wanted to go to law school because I wanted to get a degree that made people believe or know that they should listen to me, right? They see the letters and they're like, oh, she's smart or she has something to say or she's a critical thinker, right? And so that was the primary reason that I wanted to be able to go to law school. And I was good at the subject matter. So it was for me it was an easy answer. And it has done exactly what I hoped it would do. The degree has really opened doors for me in places and spaces, given me platforms and stages and ears that I otherwise wouldn't have had, outside. Because I don't think, I'm any better or any smarter than another person. Because, but when people see it on paper, they're like, "Oh, I should listen to you. You have something to say that I should hear or find value in." So that was my journey. The law school was hard. I'm not even gonna hold you. It was very challenging. Some of the most challenging years of my life. Oh, and guess who just arrived? This is my business partner and
Hello.
friend in
Awesome.
13 years.
That's
So
awesome. I'm glad you're able to join us. I was looking forward to having both of y'all.
Yeah, well, good thing my client no show. I have another one at 11, but
mhm.
I didn't want to miss as much as I could be a part of this conversation. So thanks
That's
for having.
awesome.
Yeah,
Glad to have you. But I think it's interesting what you said because just because somebody goes to law school, there are a multitude of careers that can come out of a Juris Doctorate degree. I had a
right.
pastor for a short time that had gone to law school. You have all types of, and I'm sure you went to school, some other ones that did not necessarily become lawyers. So that is
Mhm.
an interesting educational path to take.
Yes, yes, because what it says to people when they see a JD, it says, you know how to critically think. You are a great thinker. And I want to be able to have you on my team. I want you to come speak to my people. I want fill in the blank. And so, like I said, that was I didn't realize how many doors it would open. I didn't realize how much weight it would hold. But going in, that was my thought, was like, oh, I want to learn how to critically think. And you do that. You definitely do that in law school.
Awesome. Now, and obviously, we're going to talk about y'all's business, but we got to talk about your journey that led to you to be a published author,
Yeah.
where you now have a book available on multiple platforms, and we'll definitely get that information out before we get done here. But you talk about, and I was able to read some about it. You were on staff at Baylor University
Hmm.
in Waco, Texas,
Hmm.
and had a lot of issues and things that you talk about in the book. And I think it's so interesting because even though you're speaking to Black women and the Black women experience, and that's so important now with Black History Month, we can never have enough successful Black men and women in our communities. But I think people of all walks of life have experienced workplace bullying, have experienced discrimination for one reason or another, and you were very open and honest about it and were able to talk about these things. So talk about that experience and why it's so important for people to understand not only their rights, but how important their mental health is to being successful in a career.
Yeah, man, that's a good question. That is a good question because you hit it on so many fronts. One of the reasons that it was imperative for me to write this book was because I was privileged to be in a position to tell my story. I worked in the equity office at Baylor University. That was the position I was in when I left. And as an equity officer, our job is to make sure that people are being treated fairly in the workplace, right? It's supposed to be a place where people come and report injustices. Help me understand what I'm experiencing in my department. Can I report it? Will there be an investigation? Can I get some support services? Can someone hold my supervisors accountable, my colleagues accountable, all of these things? And being in that position, I watched individual after individual coming into my office, and I did my best to advocate for fairness for these people. And as an institution, I was not getting the support to actually provide fairness to people that were in the margins, whether it was because of their race, whether it was because of some form of their identity, their age, their gender. It didn't, like you said, it doesn't matter what aspect of your identity causes you to be marginalized. It was unfair, right? I started my career in Title IX. So, for those of you that are not familiar with Title IX, it is a federal law that requires or mandates gender equity. Specifically, it was executed for women's sports, women in sports, right? But then it evolved to making sure that there were fair practices for women in higher education, specifically when it came to sexual violence and sexual harassment. So that's where I started. And what I realized, specifically working at, Southern Christian institutions, is that anybody experiences sexual violence, domestic violence, sexual harassment, you are you are scarlet lettered, right? You are talking about something that should not be discussed. You are making waves around something that is uncomfortable. And so what I watched and understood in the progress of my career was that, man, there are so many people that are being silenced in these educational spaces, in these professional spaces. And so working in the equity office, I'm watching people come in and I'm listening, I'm advocating, I'm experiencing retaliation because I'm advocating. I'm literally doing the job that I was supposed to do. And so, as I mentioned in the beginning, as a kid, I just always felt compelled to right wrongs. Like, I can't sit here and I just can't sit back and watch this happen. And it had been happening to me for so many years, but I also realized that it was so much easier to fight for other people than it was to fight for myself. And
Yeah.
so then my front step, I'm experiencing the retaliation. And I also had been feeling like I'm just trying to, I'm trying to wait to see if Baylor's going to do right. I'm going to stick this out. If I do my job well, they'll support what we're doing. They'll do what's right. If I keep fight. And I slowly started to realize, like, oh man, this is deeply entrenched in the culture and nothing's going to change as much as I thought it would. Me just trying to be a really good employee and do everything that I'm supposed to do right in hopes that somebody will hear me. That's not what's going to shift the needle. I have to speak up in a big way. And that's when I decided to resign. There is a number of events that led me, and I talk about them in the book, but I left loudly. And when I left loudly, I was able to tell my story or testimony of what I had been experiencing. And there were so many people that had been so quiet for so long because they recognize I need to put food on the table. I feel like I need this job. If I speak up, I'm going to be blackballed. And so I was in a position to step away and talk about what I had seen, what I had experienced, the culture of what was happening. And there was a really big shift after I resigned and spoke up
Wow.
about, which is hard, but also it's hard, but also good. Like, if I was used as a catalyst to change and somebody else is going to have a better experience because of the choice that I made, then it wasn't in vain. So me writing the book there's so many people out here who do not have the privilege of being able to tell what they are living, don't have the language to explain their experience, and also don't realize that there's somebody out there that's validating their experience.
Wow.
Because it has not been just Black women. There have been countless individuals. I mean, there was another coworker I had, a white man who used to advocate as well for people and somehow ended up losing his job as well. So it was a systemic thing that is happening, and it's not just, like you said, a Black woman that has that experience.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important, no matter what field one of our kids go into, we have some that want to go to college, some that don't, and that's fine. But, know your rights, know the people that will advocate for you, even simple stuff. Like, I always tell this, like last year, they messed up my paycheck.
Mhm.
And a lot of people would just say, "Okay, I just, I needed my money." I mean, and they fixed it because it wasn't intentional. But a
Mhm.
lot of times, people are scared to speak up on things like that, and it wind up costing money. It can wind up costing them vacation days. And little stuff like making sure you get maternity leave, making sure you are
Yeah,
entitled to your overtime pay. And
yeah,
again, states vary from state to state, but there's several fundamental rights that employers have to give you, and it's important to know those.
yes,
Now, and the book is called "My Untold Stories: The Roads That Led to Liberation," and we'll get that link out to everybody. But
yeah.
in the midst of that, you guys have started a business together, the relationship clinic, and I think that's another important thing to talk about. And I think this is interesting too. Tomorrow here at Belman Jackson, we're having a career fair where a lot of our students will be in front of potential employers for the first time. And I
Mm.
know you guys speak about that, about being able to speak. And I always say little things like going in a room and introducing yourself. When you meet somebody, give them a handshake, look them in the eye. And a lot of mental barriers could cause you from being the best at that you could be. So
Hmm.
talk about this company you guys run together, where it kind of was born from, and what all you guys do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You want to jump in?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
So where TRC or the relationship clinic was birthed from, was truly out of a need in Waco. The short story is when we decided to move to Waco, Brittany would work for Baylor, so stay home and care for our 2-year-old, and then the unborn child we had a month after we got here. So no family, we're at a new place. We said, hey, I'll hold down the fort. You go out, and we're gonna tag team this thing. In my staying at home, I was in Virginia. I was in a PhD program for counselor education.
Wow.
I private practice, and I had worked for a community service board doing emergency services, different type of therapeutic work. When I got here, though, I didn't have my license, so I had to wait for that to come through. And I decided as we waited, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just join a private practice. And I started looking up different practices here in the Waco area. And I just kept seeing, when I went on the profiles, the websites, I would see white men, white women, white men, white women. Mind you, Waco is at that point it was 247,000 people um, in McLennan County, and there were no black male therapists in
Wow.
as a resource, and I think there were about 2 black women and maybe one woman of Asian descent, and we just thought that was a problem. So I looked at her and I was like, "Hey, I think you started a business. You think, what do you think?" And she was like, "Yep, let's go for it." So that's how TRC was birthed. It was because we wanted to be able to get an option for people of color to receive therapeutic services, because data shows that it's a little bit easier to sit in front of someone that you don't necessarily have to explain every nook and cranny of your culture while in the therapeutic room. I always like to say, people love Chick-fil-A, and you just imagine going to a place that did not have a Chick-fil-A, and how important it would be to get one up and running, just because there was a vital need. So that's how it started. We do couples, families, and also specialize in racial trauma, and we also do consulting. So a lot of consulting work that my wife is really the helm of, and we partner together. But the consulting, whether it's an hour training on DEI, or it's a 2-year, overhaul of someone's practices and protocols as it relates to DEI initiatives. So that is TRC. We also have an internship site for up and coming therapists,
Oh,
to which
cool.
yep. And then we also have we'll talk about our talk to therapists later.
Well, I was going to transition to that if it
Okay.
was okay, because I really think it ties together the skill set that both of us bring, the heart and vision for our businesses, and what we do. But when we opened the practice, we had a branding, marketing, if you will. I pray, I talk, I see a therapist, right? And the intention of it was just okay, we need something, we're going to launch the business, and this kind of speaks to what we do. But what it has evolved to very clearly is that there is a stigma around a lot of things, specifically in communities of color and specifically in communities of faith, right? If something's going on with you mentally, emotionally, psychologically, life is happening, right? Because life happens to all of us, right? The same way we care for our teeth and we go get checkups and cleanings and regular things, we need to care for our mind and our heart and our soul, right? And so I pray, I talk, I see a therapist really speaks to all of the stigmas in those communities, right? We recognize that as people of faith, that, prayer is important. Yes, I do that. But I also talk, right? I talk about what I've experienced. I talk about what's going on in my life. I do not have to feel like I have to keep it all inside, or that what's happening in the house stays in the house, or I can't speak about those things because people will think I'm, fill in the blank. And I also see a therapist. It's okay to see a professional about what's happening. Literally, they can help us in our process of navigating life, because you just need to process. Whether you're processing with a friend, whether you're processing with your barber, whether you're processing with your hairstylist, your nail tech, being able to talk is pivotal to your mental health. And if you need a professional in what you're talking about, seeing a therapist is also extremely valuable. Um, so yeah, we wear these shirts to make people, People do double takes, and they're like, "Oh, what's that?" Some people laugh. Some people, hug us, like, "Oh, that's so good." We get all the things.
Some people ask for the link to purchase, because people do want to support. And the message is destigmatizing, and like I say, it's a conversation starter. So we wear it proudly, pretty much every day.
Yeah.
As a way to just forward the work.
And that's the relationshipclinic.com, and we'll share that web address again before we get done. But I think that's important what you said, because just because you're speaking to a therapist doesn't mean you're crazy.
No.
It doesn't mean that anything you're doing is wrong. We have a lot of kids that are going to be first generation college students. We have a lot of kids that are going to do something different from what their parents did. When you're in a new environment, it is a big adjustment. I always say the biggest adjustment a kid makes is after they graduate from high school. Whatever that next step is a huge adjustment. Whether you're in the military, whether you go straight to a job, community college, four-year university, HBCU, PWI, you name it. It's a big adjustment. And it's important to know, and I think that's true what you said. A lot of times just talking about something, saying something out loud can be one of the biggest forms of therapy there is. I'm not even an expert, and I know that. So using the resources that are there, pretty much every college campus now has free mental health services for students. A lot of jobs are providing free mental health services for employees. And if you go to the military, obviously you've got it right there. So it's very important for everybody to understand that no matter what you're dealing with, big or small, there's always going to be resources, and it's never a stigma to ask for help. Because like you said, just like we strengthen our bodies, it's important to strengthen our mind. Well, I do have some questions from the students. I'm going to get to as many of these as I can. And I like this first one. This is LaCridrick Harris. He's in ninth grade, right? Yeah. And he asked, when you first opened your business, was it stressful? And how did you work together to make it less stressful?
Yeah.
Such a good question.
Great question.
Man, I love that question. Great question. Is it Kendrick?
LaCridrick.
LaKendrick. Okay, great question. When we first opened the business,
Go ahead.
There were some stressors. There definitely were some stressors, because I think for us, one of the biggest stressors was that no one in our family was really entrepreneurial. Everyone had jobs. And so we really felt like we're just feeling around in the dark. Like,
they're entrepreneurial, but just not like my mom, my dad, like they're hustle, like it was very hustle mentality. But to actually,
formalize a business,
the formalities of it, that was the stressful part. Like how to get an EIN. How do you save for taxes?
Are we an LLC? Are we sole proprietorship? All of these things. But there are resources, and we're big relational people, right? Relationships are important. Networking is important. And so for a big part for us was meeting and connecting to people that could connect us to resources and give us information and insight that we otherwise wouldn't be able to have, right? Or wouldn't be able to find. Like, there is level of research you can do, but being able to talk to people that have experiences or know things or have done things or can point you in a direction, pivotal. And that really played in our favor. The part that made it less stressful is we're friends. We like each other. We enjoy each other's company. So if you're going to start with somebody, make sure it's somebody you enjoy. Make sure it's somebody you trust. Make sure it's somebody that you value what they bring to the table. That's what I was saying.
That, yes. And I think another part is recognize each other's strengths.
Yes.
And don't let pride get in the way. I know for me, I've become a lot better at being more administratively minded. How to live by a schedule. My wife is very, very good at that. She's very good at being able to say, this is what you have, this is how you work it, versus me, I don't mind getting out there and hustling. If I'm setting up a table, if I'm talking to people, if I got to be on a corner to sell this therapeutic service to you, I'm gonna do it.
But that's the value of playing to strengths, because it took me a long time to be comfortable with the hustle aspect of business, like getting from oh, I don't want to, I don't want it to be awkward and make them feel like they have to. But the reality is, I have something of value that I want to get to the world. And
There
he
you
helped
go.
be able to pivot to that too, to walk in confidence and boldness of like, no, this is something that people need. So me being afraid or scared is standing between me being able to meet a need for a lot of people out there.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So great question.
Play to your strengths. That's a good one.
Strengths.
That's a good one. And also be willing to learn new and hard things. You're not the first and you won't be the last person to do hard things.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I love this question, and I haven't coached these at all. I'm glad they're thinking about this. This is Levon Johnson. He's in 10th grade, and he asked, "What is the most common mistake you saw somebody make while filing a complaint?"
The most common mistake. That's a good question. I think one thing I saw often, and I don't even know if I would label it a mistake. The circumstances and the culture with which I was working, people did not file complaints until it was like stage 4 cancer, right? Things are so bad that at this point, from my vantage point, it's almost as if you're coming to hospice. And when I say that is you're on your way out and this is a last ditch effort. So as I'm talking it out, one of the common mistakes was, and again, I say mistake, but I understand why people did it. It was because the culture was not supportive of advocating for fairness, right? What a healthy culture would support is you're coming to file a complaint early on so that there can be a paper trail and documentation of you communicating an issue, right? So we can see that this has been a pattern. But the culture, people knew if I'm coming forward to say something, I'm I'm blackballing myself early, right? So I'm gonna just push through and hope things get better. And things continue to get worse and worse and worse. And then they get to where it's so bad that you're literally about to lose your job. And so that's when they come. And at this point, it just looks like somebody that's disgruntled and they're just trying to save their job instead of somebody that has been experiencing problems for a long time, but there's no paper trail of you experiencing these problems. There's no documentation or history of you reporting these complaints. So being mindful of a culture, sometimes you don't know until you're in it, but paying attention. Is this a culture that will support and wants to treat me fairly? They want to see me done right. Because if it is, then I can report things early on so that there's history and that they can take the opportunities to correct what's happening. Great question.
Yeah, and I have time for two more. This one's Kamani Wright. He's in 9th grade, one of our power lifters here at Velma Jackson. And he asked, did other people judge you, especially in the black community, when you got to be where you wanted and were so open about seeking therapy?
Woo.
Wow.
Yeah. You want to jump in?
No.
You're the therapist.
That was for me.
He said, well, I think it can go to either one of us.
Did we get a
I think generationally, we definitely hit there were some challenges generationally because there was some discomfort in why do y'all feel like y'all got to talk about everything? Like, you can't just keep this in the house. You can't just keep this quiet. Why do y'all feel like you got to be out there about all the things? And my answer to that has always been because me being out here saves lives, right? There are people that are choosing not to suffer in silence because they're emboldened or encouraged, affirmed and motivated by us doing what we're doing, even though no one else is doing it. And if you are going to do something that changes and impacts lives, you're probably going to be out there alone. It's going to feel very lonely because the illustration that has always stuck with me is like people that are actually doing something that's life changing are usually the ones paving the road, not walking a road that has already been paved. So you out here cutting down trees, you out here putting down cement, and it feels like ain't nobody out here doing this because you're doing something that's life changing for a lot of people, and you are putting down a road that other people can walk behind. And most of the time, if you're doing something that no one else is doing, they're going to be very critical because it hasn't been done before. Oh, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. This is the way you're supposed to go. This is the road that's already been laid. But if you've been called to pave a new road, nobody's going to be out there doing it already.
Mm-hmm. I really can't do much to follow that. I think the only thing I would add would be, people often, to the last part of your question, about getting kicked back about going to therapy. People come to therapy because other people don't go to therapy. So people go to therapy to deal with those that are not in therapy.
Well, that's good.
So whenever we have gotten that feedback or that kickback about why you gotta go to therapy, just talk to Jesus, just pray more. In my mind, I'm like, and that's exactly why I'm going to go to therapy. Or that's exactly why somebody else needs to be in therapy, is because of that mindset. So once you understand what you value and you get strong in your value and it's cemented, it just becomes more of a routine thing. Like it just kind of becomes like water off a duck's back.
Awesome. Well, I got one more from the students. This is Zayden Reed. She's in ninth grade. And you cannot say your five little girls because that's cheating. But she asked, what is the biggest motivation to stay determined to keep going on in your career?
Neither one.
Go ahead.
Let me jump in because I got to get to my session.
Okay, go ahead.
It's the rhetoric that we hear on the news. There has to be some type of countervailing voice to what we hear in the world, on news, in your house, whatever the case, whatever it may be. That to me is why. Because if we stop talking, if we chill out, then there's no other narrative, and people will be left with these very harmful rhetoric that's out. So that's why and then you hear people also say how important it is to do the work that we do, and I think that also helps go forward.
Yeah.
All right, I'm hopping my session.
All right. See ya.
Appreciate you guys.
I would not limit it to, it being my five little girls. But it is a part of the answer because I see what we're doing as like a rung on a ladder, right? I'm as high up on this ladder because of the people that came before me that did hard things and created somewhere for me to have a firm footing. And so my opportunity to put a rung on the ladder creates another opportunity for someone else to go further than me. And that includes my children. There are things that my parents did that created a rung on the ladder for me to keep going. And there's things that I'm doing and my kids are seeing me do and being a part of me do that I never could have pictured my parents doing, right? Another rung on the ladder. And so that is a big part of what continues to motivates me. There is an opportunity for someone behind me to go even further than where I've gone because I continue to persevere.
That's awesome. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But a couple things before we go. Obviously, BrittneyWardlaw.com, therelationshipclinic.com, the name of the book, and it's I just had the link to it.
I know it's
the name of the book,
My Untold Stories. I help you out.
My Untold Stories, The Roads That Led to Liberation. That's available on all platforms.
Yes.
Now, the last thing before we go, and like I said, it's just so coincidental. This is Black History Month, and something I always say, and Black History Month has never been about putting other people down. Nothing about it is anti anything.
Hmm.
Pro-black does not mean anti-white. It does not mean anti-Asian. It does not mean anti-Hispanic. But it is
Right.
about celebrating the accomplishments of so many people that never got credit that they definitely deserve. But
Yeah.
right now, I've got a room full of very intelligent, hardworking black kids. A lot of black kids will see this later at our other schools. But why is it so important for them to not only understand why they are so needed to be successful, but for them to understand that they need to find people to talk through these obstacles they are going to face?
Because every single individual in that room is incredibly and purposefully made and unique. There is something that you have that no one else does. There is something incredibly unique about you. And there are so many things and voices in this world that will want you to feel like you are inadequate, that you do not deserve to have a voice, that you are not valuable, and that's a lie. And if we can, if we're subjected to lie and we succumb to that lie, then the world will not get access to the unique person that you are, because you will feel like you need to hide. You will feel like that you don't need to um, lean into your passions and your interests and your giftings. Because if you don't do that, then we will not get access to who you are. You will not have the opportunity to impact people in the world. So it is so important that you care for yourself well so that you can operate and be in the fullness of who you are and who you were uniquely created to be, which is needed and necessary in our world.
Absolutely. Well, again, we thank you and Gary for joining us. Gary and Brittney Wardlaw, all the way from Duncanville, Texas. We thank y'all for joining us, and I encourage everybody go to y'all's website. Great, great content, great easy reads just about y'all's amazing lives. But we thank you so much for taking some time for us today.
Thank you so much for having us. This was a privilege, and you do have some brilliant humans in that classroom. Great question.
I agree. I agree. Well, we'll talk to you soon, buddy. Enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you.